I remember thinking that I trusted myself more than I trusted the company. I trusted my ability to do a good job more than I trusted the company would always put me in the right role with the right pay, etc. It really was just this kind of visceral fear, like I felt it down here, that I needed to be in charge of my success. Some of my leaders and mentors were the folks that built the business channel at T-Mobile, and one day they were just gone. And I'm sure they had their reasons. It was part of a bigger vision. But to me, I found some of those departures shocking. And I didn't want to be one of the people that was shocked.
Hey, welcome back to the Revenue Vault. I'm Marcus Chan, Wall Street Journal bestselling author and CEO of Bentley Consulting. Now, for about 7 years now, a friend of mine, Adam Morris, has texted me the same question. Hey, Marcus, where's my invite? Now, I'm embarrassed to say I've known Adam for well over a decade, but you know what? 100 plus episodes into the Revenue Vault, I finally caved. So here it is, Adam. It took me long enough. Now, here's the reality. All jokes aside, Adam has earned it. Adam was a top 5% rep at T-Mobile out of literally hundreds and thousands of reps, and then walked away in 2012 to build SalesFirst Recruiting. Now, thousands of searches later, he places sales talent all the way from the rep level all the way to the executive level and nothing else. So he sees your hiring problems before you do. Now, here's what I love. Adam will tell a founder, a CEO, a CRO, a head of sales, a VP of sales, flat out, that their bad hires are system problems in a costume. Now, by the end, you'll know which of the 3 first hires you need, how to spot a people problem versus a process problem, and why your turnover is probably on you. Let's get into it. Hey, Adam, I'm so pumped to have you on. Now, here's the thing. I know before you started your business, you were in the top 5% at T-Mobile as a rep. Why even walk away from all that in 2012 to start a recruiting firm?
Well, first, let me say out of respect to the ample talent and my peers at T-Mobile, pretty often I would get to the top 5%. I was always competing, but I was not just sitting at the top for 7 or 8 years every minute of the day. We had like, in mid-market, we had like 400 reps. I'm guessing in enterprise, we had like 200 reps or something like that. So yes, there was a group of us that were always fighting for the top, but there was lots of folks that could beat me on any given quarter. But to answer your question, so I was there maybe 7 or 8 years. I had seen all sorts of reorgs and mergers, more importantly, failed mergers. I've seen layoffs, and every once in a while you see your senior VP walking down the halls and they've got 2 19-year-old early grads from Harvard and they've got pink highlighters. And you just always knew in the back of your mind with a big corporation like T-Mobile that one day your future could be decided by somebody else. Now, I had a kid at the time. My son Jackson was probably 2.5, and my wife was pregnant, and we had found out that she was pregnant with twins. And if you combine all those things, I started to get worried. I started to panic a little bit because I had 1 and 2 on the way, and I think the merger with AT&T had just failed. I could be a little off time-wise, but I remember thinking that I trusted myself more than I trusted the company. I trusted my ability to do a good job more than I trusted the company would always put me in the right role with the right pay, etc. So one day, a really good friend of mine who, Marcus, you know, his name was Chris Shablock. He ran
That's right.
He ran West Coast Careers up in Seattle, and he had been bugging me for a long time to franchise his company in Portland. And so one day I just said yes. And I went up and lived with him for about 2 months. I ordered like a $70 bunk bed from Walmart and had it shipped to his house. And I lived in his home office and left my super supportive, slightly upset wife at home with 2 infants and a toddler Chris taught me how to run an agency. The work was not that much different than being a sales rep. It's really just a grind, and you apply the same skill set. You just change a few things to be a recruiter. And then a few years later, I bought out of the franchise agreement, and then I made it an independent agency, SalesFirst. But Chris Shablik and I are still really close friends.
Wow. I mean, I just want to take a step back, Adam, because
Yeah.
what I think is, and actually, I've never heard this part of the story, which is actually kind of amazing, right? I mean, so here you are, consistently top performer, right? A large organization. You're making a great income. You have a great life. But not only that, not only do you have like a young son, now your wife is pregnant. Most people at that point, they're like, I need to have that more, I need more stability. I gotta like buckle that. I need those health benefits. I need all those things. And then you said, I'm gonna do the complete opposite. What most people would probably do. Hey, it's awesome. It's a great life we have. I'm gonna say goodbye. I'm gonna leave my wife for 2 months, move in with a friend in the, up north, and learn this whole new business. Well, my wife's at home with like basically 3 kids.
Yeah.
What gave you that courage to be able to draw a line in the sand and make that move?
My wife was wondering the same thing. She did not fully see the vision, but she now agrees it was the right move. But it really was just this kind of visceral fear. Like I felt it down here that I needed to be in charge of my success. And now realistically, I've had plenty of friends who have been there for 20 plus years now, 25 years, some of them. And so could I have stuck around and been loyal to that company for decades? Probably. They're absolutely amazing organization. But there were also folks who were shown the door where I was legitimately surprised. Some of my leaders and mentors were the folks that built the business channel at T-Mobile. And one day they were just gone. And I'm sure they had their reasons, and I'm sure it was part of a bigger vision. But to me, I found some of those departures shocking. And I didn't want to be one of the people that was shocked. And now there's other challenges I deal with as an agency owner that I didn't have to deal with as a rep insulated by a multi-billion-dollar organization with hundreds of thousands of employees. Actually, maybe not hundreds of thousands, tens of thousands.
That's a lot.
But it was a good trade-off for me.
Hey, I want to pause on something before we keep going here. Everything we have been talking about, the leaders I see get the biggest breakthroughs are the ones who can actually quantify the size of the problem before they try to fix it. So I built a free Revenue Leak Playbook to help with exactly that. The calculator shows you the real dollar cost of your current win rate and pipeline gaps in a 30-day diagnostic and a 30, 60, 90-day action plan. So if you're running a B2B sales org with at least 5 to 25 plus reps, go grab it. Link is in the description below. Okay, where were we? I think what's so cool, right, is because you and I started working together probably a little bit after that time, right? Because I was a sales manager. I needed people on my team, and you were a huge part of our success of being able to find the right talent, help me grow the team, because I had to do basically a rebuild and go on from there to other roles too. But it's been really cool to see obviously your success, right? This is like well over a decade later, and you have now done thousands of searches. So with that being said, in your experience now, because you've worked with so many different organizations, when do companies finally realize they need a real sales hire versus like shooting from the hip?
Sure. So let me set a couple parameters. First, let's talk about a founder-led company. And let me also say that I'll share some patterns I've seen, but by no means is this every situation. But I think you might suspect that a founder thinks we need more revenue. I want to hire a sales rep. And that happens. But I think more often than not, one day a founder realizes that they're the bottleneck. And sometimes they're happy when they figure that out. And then sometimes they don't want to believe that, but then they finally come around to it. And it's really common for a founder to want control of their business because they spend the first couple years just trying to build systems that they can control. and they can get this business moving in a direction. At a certain point, they're going to realize that every deal requires their involvement, and that is stopping them from building out another part of the business that is in need. It could be operations, it could be marketing, it could be anything. And so if a founder is spending all of their time selling, they start to have the thoughts that they need somebody to help them.
Yeah, you're so spot on, right? Because I remember, I think even my own business, right? When as I started as a solopreneur, started hiring people, and then in 2021 was my realization I was a huge bottleneck. I actually remember the exact moment. I literally remember, like, because this was like COVID was kind of starting to wrap up a little bit, if you will, and things were opening back. And I remember it was July 2021, and I basically had been running with basically a virtual assistant, just me, and I went to Hawaii. Maui. It was our first vacation, like a year and a half because of COVID, right? And I'm excited. I'm like, this is great.
Yeah.
2 weeks. And I go out there, and it's an amazing time. And I said, I'm not going to run any sales calls. I'm not going to do any business, right? I might just like kind of work my team here and there, get some stuff done, but I'm not going to really take any calls. And we did half the revenue that month, over half the revenue. And I was like, oh my God, this is horrible. I'm the bottleneck. I can't have this happen. I can't not take vacations, right? So at that
Yes.
point, it was a while. So then at that point, then I built out a BDR team. I built out an AE team on my team. We started scaling from there. And that following in 2022, we had a banner year. And also, like, I had more bandwidth. I could focus on other projects. I wrote a book. It became a Wall Street Journal bestseller. I could start scaling other parts of the team. It was a whole different like world. I'm like, oh, wow. Now, what we see sometimes, right? And you kind of mentioned this before, right? Because you had mentioned like that first sales hire is so critical. And you split them into, I think, the shadow, replacement, and builder, right?
Yeah.
First, what is that? And then which one do leaders get wrong the most? And what's really the tell of determining what's the best type of person to hire?
So a shadow rep, you might call a sales assistant, but I slept on those terms for about a week because there are so many situations, and I thought a shadow rep, not that they're a shadowy figure, but they're essentially there to shadow the owner. But really, it's somebody who works closely with the founder, who takes stuff off of their plate, but doesn't fully replace them on the client-facing side.
Yep.
And so, so you'll have maybe a founder who has a certain way they like to do things, and they don't want to pass that off to somebody else. They just want somebody to take parts of it off their plate so they can continue to be the client-facing representative.
So they're almost like a more
That is
junior
why
type of rep. Is that how you kind of see it?
more often than not it is.
A more green. Yep,
Yep.
got it. Yeah.
Yep. So that's what I call the shadow rep. A replacement rep is when a founder hires somebody with the intent of that person fully replacing the founder in a sales capacity. And a builder is when a founder says, I actually need somebody to do something more than replace me. I need somebody to come in and build systems, build a team, because I need to completely get out of sales. And I can make probably 100 subcategories, but for the purpose of this blog I wrote, those 3 were sufficient. But I would say that leaders, what they get wrong most often is hiring a replacement rep. And the reason for that is because most founders actually have a sales process, but it's not documented. And so they assume that somebody can come in and replicate years of their own learned instincts. And I think that is probably the most common reason that the first sales hire could fail in a founder-led business. Is because the process falls apart when the founder isn't in the room. Or the process actually might go fine when the founder isn't in the room, but the founder views it as failing because it's not exactly how they do things.
Yeah.
A system isn't really a system unless it's documented. And so I don't know what the percentage is. Maybe maybe 15 to 20% of our business is a founder-led company hiring their first sales rep. It might even be less than that. But I'll always ask them, is your system documented? And more often than not, it isn't.
Yeah.
And I'll tell them, if you really just want to hire one person and you want them to be an individual contributor, you don't want to hand off too much responsibility, you really need to spend about a month or so documenting everything you do, why you do it.
Oh, yeah.
And it doesn't need to be perfect, but get something to a rep so they can start executing the system that you've built. Because if you're just hoping they're going to come in and do it the way you've done it, it's just not going to happen.
Yeah, you're so spot on, right? And it's interesting because I had the benefit of running sales teams for so long, right? So like even personally, I think myself in that situation, once I knew I was going to basically bring some people onto my team, I literally built out a 90-day playbook every single day, exactly what to do, the exact process, document step by step, exactly what to say, who do we go after, everything I knew would ramp a rep up, right? To even what we do even ongoing, right? So I actually built out and recorded a whole online course and modules and systems and checkpoints, and there was a high level of accountability. But like, because we did that, right? Like my new hires were producing within a couple of weeks. They were already producing booked meetings, and we started closing deals in the first month, right? Because I had that benefit of doing that versus I've seen that happen with other organizations where it's a founder trying to make that transition. There's no real proven system, and the new hire comes in, they basically don't perform to that same level, and the founder just basically has to get rid of them after a few months, right? Wasting all that time and energy, right? So on the flip side, let's just say, for example, because I'm sure you've seen this too, right? There are some orgs where maybe it's the CEO or the founder, they have kind of scaled up to 5 or 10 reps, okay? What type of hire should they hire at that point? How do they know which hire to hire? Because I've also seen it where sometimes they might hire a shadow replacement or builder, even those, or the wrong ones potentially, even at that stage. And they've just had really atrocious turnover, and they just continue to kind of almost like throw people into the mix, kind of hope that solves the problem. So if they're in a situation like that, what should they do first? Or who should they hire in that type of situation?
Oh man, it's so contextual because let's say you run a services company like Cintas, where you need feet on the street, and you need to get in front of your people, your constituents. I would say getting a builder, right? And it's not that difficult to find somebody who has run a team of reps who manage a territory actively. But let's say that you have a very unique product or service where your service is very valuable at a very unique time, but it has no value at another time. For example, if you were a law firm, let's say that there is somebody who gets a DUI. Probably they're going to call their attorney, and they're going to call repeatedly until they get a call back because they're scared and they need help right away. But now imagine that your attorney calls you and they're like, hey, gotten any dewies lately? Or
they're
going to be like, whoa, bro, what? What are you talking about? So that would be a type of business with a unique need, a unique value. Whereas Cintas, to a certain extent, provides sort of a commodity. It's a service that needs to help a customer year round. So it's different in every situation.
How do you know which one to hire at that stage, right? You have 5, 10 reps, you're like, and you've just been churning people, so you don't really know what's wrong, but you're like, I think we're kind of doing okay, but maybe the average rep productivity is not that great. And usually I find that they're probably hiring the wrong person, or maybe they don't have systems in place. So how do you know which one to actually hire?
So I talk a lot about founders being honest with themselves. If a founder wants a lifestyle business where they want to make a certain amount of money and have a business that is very manageable to them, that is a fantastic goal. As long as they're honest about what they want and it's not different from what they state, then they're good to go, and they can they can hire any one of those and be fine. And so it might be that the seller says, or the founder says, you know what? I am really, really good at selling and I like selling. I don't want to be involved in operations, but I just want somebody to handle some of the details because I'm not very detail oriented.
Yeah.
Then you can hire a shadow rep or a sales assistant and be absolutely good to go forever.
Yeah.
And even if there's some turnover, that might be okay with them because maybe it's not that difficult to train somebody up and maybe they expect somebody to move on to bigger and better things and they root for that person their whole career. But now if they're looking for a replacement rep or a builder and you start having turnover there, that's where you start really having to look at the patterns and stop looking at the person that moved on. And I think it's also, if you hear a founder blame a rep for not doing something the right way, if you hear that repeatedly, if you see a bunch of bad Glassdoor reviews, or if your existing team hears you badmouth previous employees, that's something we pay attention to. There's a book that we all read here. It's one of my favorite books of all time. It's called Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink. And the big message of that book is that if you are blaming others, you've already lost. If everything is your fault, then you're going to win.
Yeah.
And so when a rep does something wrong, or when a rep leaves, you should say, whoa, what was not right here that I need to adjust so that we can improve this company the next time we hire somebody? And when a rep leaves, if you can get an exit interview and you can ask them, say, hey, I am totally fine with you leaving. I'm legitimately sorry it didn't work out for you here. What can I do differently to make sure the next person is successful? If you can get that meeting, do it and really heed their advice. Because, and by the way, the rep may not have the perfect answer, but if you can spot patterns and fix it, you're just going to get better and better and better. And you can accept the fact that this turnover happened for a reason and adjust it and move on.
Yeah, I think I see this all the time, right? Where it's really easy just to blame, this is whether it's a founder behind their first hire, if they're scaling a team, but they see consistently a lot of turnover on their team. I think it's the rep's fault. They didn't do this. They didn't do that. They weren't a culture fit, right? It's so easy to point the finger, right? And you've written in the past that usually if they're consistently struggling, they have the high turnover, it's usually like a systems problem in disguise. What do you mean by that exactly?
A lot of it's going to go back to the documentation. And sometimes you might have a great system and maybe you have a really good rep who doesn't actually fit that system that well. And I think it's totally fair game to exit that person, but I think it's also fair game to let that person make adjustments that fits their style a little better. I don't know. I didn't really see that at bigger corporations like T-Mobile. I don't know if you saw that at Cintas. I think companies that have invested millions into their systems, like these big organizations, are probably more likely to say, look, we got our system for a reason. And if you don't fit it, feel free to move on. No hard feelings. And I think that is totally fair in the world of business and sales. But if you are a smaller organization and you feel like you have some real talent and somebody wants to do things just a little bit differently, I think it's okay to make some exceptions and see how it works out. But yeah, a lot of it is documentation or maybe just holes that you didn't realize exist. Maybe the handoff from sales to operations needs to be better and more complete. Or maybe you need to take things off of your rep's plate. That is one thing I see a lot of, by the way, is reps are being asked to do so much. And let's take a CRM. Let's take Salesforce, for example. I think it's smart that a company have a CRM. And I think reps should do the best job they can in there. But man, I also see reps be absolutely hindered by putting in obscene amounts of data that are meant to pad the stats of a sales leader, when in fact, it doesn't really help the rep.
Yep.
And so if you can take things off of your rep's plate and look for holes in the process, you might find that sales will go up. Maybe you need to get a rev ops person. Maybe you need to get a sales coordinator to help reps get that stuff done. But if you're constantly blaming your reps, it's not the reps.
Yeah, 100%. I see this all the time. It's a
Yeah.
constant blaming of the reps. And sometimes it's like either the systems are broken, right? And I always think back, it's usually a systems issue, right? For example, we were working with a client and they wanted to fire their whole sales team because they weren't performing, right? And they were doing more of like an enterprise type of sale. So it's complex, multiple stakeholders, long sales cycle. And I took a look at their team and they had hired good people, right? But majority of the background of those people were like SDRs. So here you have, so you have these really good people, and some of them were, yes, they were enterprise SDRs, but like they knew how to generate pipeline. That's kind of what they had already proven in their process, but they didn't know how to run a complex sale. So there was like a mismatch in like what the talent on the team and the requirements of the job. And when you take a step back, there's like multiple like broken system issues. Like number one, what's their hiring process look like? Obviously, it wasn't designed to hire for the right person they need. That was a big issue, right? And then, of course, there was no real onboarding. Then there was no training and development and support. And then there was no real coaching from their leader. So like there's all these systemic issues that kind of broke down. But what they kept doing was throwing money and bodies at the problem and wondering why. What is wrong with all these people? It's just a bad market out there, right? So I think that point that you mentioned where that self-honesty is so vital. Because otherwise, you might just continue to throw money at a problem with a huge, bunch of leaks, on the bottom, right? Now, as we talk about like, even like that leadership component, right? A lot of times I find is the CEO or the founder, they're trying to think like, hey, when should I hire maybe my first sales leader? So maybe they have a handful of reps and they're thinking about the sales leader. Or sometimes I've also seen where they want the first hire to be a sales leader. What do you recommend in a situation like that? Like, how do they know when to hire their first true sales leader?
They have to be ready to actually give authority to somebody rather than just give tasks to somebody. Once they feel comfortable with that, they're probably ready. But even more than being comfortable with that, they really have to sit and think through what stuff a sales leader is able to approve on their own and what stuff they're not. And I think it would be really smart to have their sales leader meet with operations leaders and say, what are my parameters? If I approve this, is it going to hurt what you're doing or is it going to help what you're doing? And so if a founder has a sales leader, they really should make the commitment. I'm going to give it a year or two where I give them the authority to make the decisions they need to make, but here are my boundaries. And so I want you, before you make any decision, I want you to get sign off of your peer over here. And if you guys believe this is good business, go for it. And if you need anything additional, you can come to me. But the worst thing that could happen is that you hamstring your leader by continuing to be the bottleneck. And if you say, well, I really just want you training the reps, that could be problematic. If so, you should just get a sales trainer. But if somebody comes on board to your company and they believe that they're going to have the real ability to lead a team, they should have the real authority to lead the team too. Sometimes I walk the owner through that and ask them what sorts of things need approval, right? Like let's take manufacturing, for example. I could completely understand how a sales leader could sign some deal that loses money, right? At Cintas, I could totally see that happen. With us here at SalesFirst, my recruiters and my recruiting managers have certain concessions that they are allowed to make without ever consulting me. And it's really clearly written in all of our documentation. And then there is a threshold that I say, before you give this concession, you really got to come to me because we have to look at all these different areas. So I would say that is when a founder knows they're ready, when either they already have that information in their head, they know when they need to be consulted, when they don't, or they're comfortable with the fact that they need to build something like that. But then they need to get out of the sales leader's way. That's easier said than done, because I would say a lot of founders want the control more than they want the results. Once they can get past that, things open up quite a bit for them, even though there's, potentially some risk there too.
Well, I think that's such a great point. And I think it boils on the same principle where it's like what you're talking about, what you have in place right now for your organization, you have rules of engagement. That's part of the system of ensuring everyone knows what the selling rules are, what's the rules of engagement. So they know what the sandbox, right? Hey, here's the sandbox.
Yeah.
You can play within this, right? And that way everyone feels good. The CEO founder feels really good. That exec feels really good. Everyone's on the same page. There's an alignment of expectations, right? Now, I think it was great. Now, sometimes I see when they're hiring their first sales leader, there's a big difference between hiring, say, like a VP of sales who is a builder, okay, who hasn't built everything, and there's also versus the one who's only really maintained. So, what really separates the difference between those two, and why is that important?
When you say maintain, do you mean account managers, or do you mean people who fit into an existing system elsewhere? They never actually built the system.
Exactly that. Exactly that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I would probably say that a builder is wired differently. The titles wouldn't matter. History comes into play. If they've already built something, that there's a certain safety net there.
Yep.
But if you have somebody who is naturally good at spotting inefficiencies and naturally good at spotting opportunities, and they're willing to do the grunt work while building a strategy, I would say those are the 3 to 4 things that actually define a builder. And it's hard because one day you might have to really sit and do a SWOT analysis. And then if the phone rings and now you have to go full steam ahead on handling this inbound lead that you see as an opportunity. Or this person might go to the founder one day and say, boy, we have a real issue here. Our handoffs to operations are terrible and we need to fix this. I'm going to have this done within the next 3 weeks. So it's really just wiring. And actually, I think that's where a lot of these personality assessments come in. Personally, we like the CVI over here, the Core Values Index. But honestly, I think they're all pretty darn good. If any of them have been around and have been refined, the DISC, the Culture Index, there's a million of them. If you can find one that you like and you can really sit down with somebody and start talking about the ideal profile in this ecosystem, I think that could really help you find a builder rather than a maintainer.
Like, how do you know which one you need? Now, let me give you an example, right? I think this is something that a lot of people don't think about, right? I mean, for example, I got a client, very successful business, right? They do like, 20, 30 million a year. They have a sales team. It's like 15 people. And they've kind of just gone through like just nonstop VPs of sales that run the org. It's just in and out. And even their most recent one, like they found the CEO, pulled me aside. I was like, hey, what's your gauge? Because once we started working, what's your gauge on this VP of sales? And I kind of shared there's some pink flags that I had saw, right? And then he started to tell me other things. He's like, yeah, turns out like this, like they actually needed a builder is what they needed, right? Even though they looked successful, they had already built up, but like there was just stuff they're like just building the plans, they're flying it still, right? And they really need someone to kind of systemize and just have a really full-blown system put in place for everything from hiring, training, development, coaching, et cetera, right? And putting other leaders in place. And it turns out this person had only been a maintainer. So he's already integrated in the system. He was able to have success doing that because he had all these other things, So like he almost had like horse blinders on, if you will, of only just like maintaining versus they needed really a builder, right? So I think about a client like that in hindsight, what could have maybe that CEO or founder looked at first to realize, who do I need to hire as the right person, a builder or a maintainer?
So I think if you have a frontline leader somebody who is directly leading the people who are in the field, dealing with the customers directly. Depending on what you need, you could be fine with a builder or a maintainer.
Mhm.
If you already have a refined process and you just need somebody to come in and enforce activity and do coaching and just hold reps accountable, a maintainer is probably fine.
Yeah.
I think where you start really having to make sure you need a builder is when you have your first leader and or you have a second line or third line leader, a leader who's leading other leaders. Those folks are going to be behind a desk more often than a frontline leader. And they have to sit and they have to focus on revenue operations. They have to work with marketing and operations. It's their job to have a vision for the sales channel. And so if you have a really big organization, and let's go back to, I'll go back to T-Mobile and Setasa. I'm sure those two organizations are structured similarly, where you have frontline leaders. They're typically called sales managers. Then you have a director of sales who oversees a group of sales managers. And then you normally have a VP of sales who oversees a group of directors. And with each movement toward the back, and I believe in a back to front organization, not a bottom to top, those folks have to continue to build the channel and make it unique, and they have to continue to keep it relevant. And I hope that answers your question. Because if you have a VP of sales and they're only concerned about KPIs, I would be concerned. I think the VP of sales, their job is to make sure that everyone else is fully enabled to kick butt in sales.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think when you take a step back, I mean, really, a CEO or founder who's listening to this and they're trying to scale their org, right? If they have the goals that can really scale in that org, that's self-honesty of exactly where we're at right now and what we need to get to the next level is so vital. Because then that really determines like, who do we actually need to hire? Like, can we just like get a maintainer? Cool, that's great. We hire a maintainer. They can just keep the wheels on the bus and make it, just, they basically get improved over time. But the builder, right? Like I would argue those are, a really good builder is actually harder to find, right? I'll argue that in a sense of a lot of times, eventually those builders, once they realize how good they are, they start their own business. They're like, what am I doing? I mean, I was a builder, right?
See that a lot.
I mean, that's what ends up happening, right? So I think that self-honesty is so key, right? And speaking of self-honesty, right? Like when there's a leader who keeps hiring, good reps who basically stall out, what is it not a hiring problem at all?
Let me think about this. So if a founder keeps on having turnover, when is it a systems problem or company problem?
Essentially, yeah.
Yeah, so one failed rep could be the rep. Multiple failed reps usually indicate a business problem. But if I go back to extreme ownership, if a good founder practices that, then those problems will dissipate over time. And I also would tell a founder not to be too tough on themselves if they're having these problems, but they're open to fixing it. If they're not open to fixing it, I will typically take a step back and fade away a little bit. We had a client, they reached out to us, they needed a lot of help. The owner was highly involved. And in my opinion, it was a little bit volatile. And they were always bad-mouthing everyone on their team. And that was red flag number one. We had somebody get an offer and they had to go through the background check before the offer was made. And the background check included getting references from their existing leaders at their company.
Right.
And
That's a bit of a problem.
I pointed out that is uncommon and very risky.
Yeah.
And the founder lashed out at me and told me that they're not, that they've been doing background checks for 20 plus years and that I'm not going to tell them they can't do background check. And I said, no, absolutely do a background check, but give a conditional offer. Say, I'm making you an offer, and once you accept, we're going to do a background check. And if that goes well, then it'll be finalized. I was like, that's actually pretty common.
Pretty standard.
Yeah, but it's not common to have that background check reach out to your existing leader. That's very risky. And if somebody has responsibilities in their life, they're going to say no to that.
Oh, yeah.
I was shown the door after that conversation. And to this day, that company still has insanely high turnover and has a lot of trouble hiring people. Yeah. And so that's the kind of founder we stay away from. Yeah. And that is a founder who does not accept responsibility. But if you have a founder that says, Marcus, I need help because we're doing something wrong. All these reps leave and I don't want them to leave. Yeah. And if you point out all these things they're doing wrong and they say thank you, boy, you've got a good business there because down the line, they're going to be fixed.
100%.
Other problems will pop up, but they fix those too. Like, so if an owner says, I'm not perfect, my company is not perfect, and I'm totally okay with that, I just want to get better every day, boy, that is a winning organization. And that's how most companies actually are. Like, we don't do everything right, but when we identify a problem, we get a little committee together and fix it.
Yeah, 100%.
And if I have an idea and people don't like it, I want to hear why they don't like it. Sometimes they're right and sometimes they overrule them. But that is really important if you want to have an organization that lasts and if you want to have the kind of life you want. If you just want to face the same problems every single day and not change it, because that's going to be a rough road for you.
You're so spot on, right? To build a durable organization, and I would even argue you need that up and down the chain, right? So it's not just like that founder, that CEO. It's like every level you're working with, you need that level of openness and coachability to be able to look in the mirror and be okay with that and make some pivots, right? It's funny because as you're saying that, I'm like, yeah, you know what? Like we've had some people that we basically turned down as clients for that reason, because I'm like, why we're going to work with you guys if you're not willing to deploy what we're going to recommend? It just becomes a waste of resources, right? Or sometimes we say, hey, you shouldn't do this. For example, like sometimes they want us to come train their team, but I'm like, well, you have other systemic issues you need to work on first. Like your leadership is not dialed, your systems aren't dialed. We should fix those first before we talk to the reps, because it doesn't matter if we train the reps. If everything around the system is broken, it's not gonna hold in place. Now, we've covered a lot of ground today. What didn't I ask you that we should have talked about?
I'll tell you what I believe is the number one issue in recruiting here in 2026. And I don't know if anyone's going to care about this, but I still believe it's number one.
I want to hear, because I'm a firm believer, people who are in your industry, you get the front lines of seeing how the market is shifting across the board. You can see hiring pattern, what companies are doing. you see the shifts before it shows up in the stock market.
Ever since 2020, we have been in a little bit of like a rubber band market. And every year we experience a shift in the market. And so the rubber band is bouncing and maybe it's starting to settle a little bit now. It seems like each year the market doesn't know what it wants to be. And because of that, employers are sometimes a little shy of pulling the trigger. They don't know if they want extra headcount. They're afraid it could dilute sales for their other team. It could cost them more money when not enough revenue is going to come in. So those are legitimate fears. But the number one issue I see is that employers are waiting too long to pull the trigger. Right. And I would much rather them have a robust, tough hiring process and then pull the trigger immediately when someone makes it through than him and ha.
Right.
Just last week, we had two employers who said, I think I'm ready to hire this candidate. And we say, oh, they're gone.
Yeah.
And they find themselves upset. Sometimes they're upset with us. And we tell them, you have got to be decisive. And if you need a lot of folks in the process to vet these people, that's totally fine too, but lay it out ahead of time. Right. Let them know it's going to be tough. Let them know what it's going to take to get the job. But when they're done, you got to make that offer and you got to do it fast, because if you stall the momentum, you've just lost it. You have to keep the momentum in the process. There is a certain amount of excitement and there's a journey that the candidates believe they have to go through that feels normal to them. And if they don't have that, they're going to accept at a place where there is one.
I think that is so insightful, right? And it's interesting, right? Because I've called it omission bias, right? Which is it feels safer to not make a decision than to make a decision.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah, I like that.
they
Yeah.
get stalled out, right? And usually I talk about from a sales perspective, right? Like, customers, they want to de-risk everything, right? But the cost, as we see here, especially in the world of talent, we're talking about human capital management here. We're on a war on talent, which really determines the growth of your organization. The slower you play that move, the longer it takes to actually find the right person, right? And you also lose great talent in the same situation. It's the same thing with like putting systems in place. If you know you need to hire people, you put some systems in place so they can stay and be great. It's like the longer you take to do these things, the more it costs you in the long run in between. So super impactful. Now, amazing conversation today. I know a lot of leaders out there are listening to this, whether they're a CEO, a founder, a CRO, a sales VP. If they want to learn more about you, if they want to get some help, find some grade A top talent, whether it's at the rep level, at the leadership level, executive level, where can people find you and learn more about what you do?
The number one place to find us is via our website at salesfirstrecruiting.com. We are commonly called SalesForce Recruiting, which is not us. They're slightly bigger, with billions more in revenue.
But not as big as you.
Yeah. Yeah, SalesFirst Recruiting. We focus exclusively on client-facing talent. And so sales reps, sales leaders, and sales support.
Beautiful.
And Marcus, the reason for that is because truthfully, I'm a one-trick pony over here. If we were recruiting scientists and they say, yeah, we totally know how to mix those chemicals, I would just have to take their word for it. But if a candidate tells me what their KPIs are, what their activity is, and then they tell me what their closing percentage and revenue is, I'm going to know if something is fishy. And my recruiters that stick around 10 years at a time now, they know it too. And so pretty darn good at recruiting the right talent who is honest about their strengths and honest about their weaknesses, and then placing them in the right roles for them to succeed.
So that's a wrap on this episode of the Revenue Vault. Now, if you got value, here's your next step. 1, go to venleyconsulting.com/teams and get a free performance scan of your sales org. We'll show you exactly where deals are stalling and how to fix it. The link is also below in the show notes. Or if you prefer to first self-diagnose, download our free Revenue Leak diagnostic kit below and pinpoint exactly where deals are stalling and what to fix. And of course, if this episode gave you even one insight worth sharing, send it to a sales leader you respect. Hey, I'm Marcus Chan, and thanks so much for joining us in the Vault.